Hi, welcome to Clutter Bravado.
Yes, and it's the energy. It's not just about the stuff.
So we should probably just get into it, right?
Let's go.
Hello.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. I mean, a week ago we wished it. What was it? 10 days ago we were like, "Hey, Happy New Year,
Yeah.
2025, detox, good to go."
How has that gone for us so far?
So far in LA, not so good.
Not so good. Not so good.
So
Just for archival purposes, I'm sure that anyone who's listening to this when it comes out knows what's going on, but Los Angeles has been on fire for about a week. And last week on Tuesday, it really began. And the amount of devastation that we've experienced in LA is unprecedented. But, in situations like this, one of the things that I have to look for is what people are doing to help. Because when something like this happens, my first instinct is to lay in my bed, curl under my covers, and cry. But I had no power for 3 days, and thank you very generously for giving me a place to stay, me and my dog, because we're so many people are in so much fear. But as soon as I was able to get back into my place and settle down, I'm like, okay, how can I help? And one thing that's amazing about Los Angeles, we talk about LA quite a bit here, and the difference between LA and New York. And I don't know how the comparison fits here, but what I will say is that LA is sometimes called a very lonely city, like I said in the last episode. There are so many opportunities to volunteer all over the city doing anything, like helping to clean up, helping to collect donations, people who are donating, either furniture or water or things for firefighters. And I've heard so many reports of people going to places where they can volunteer, and they have a sign-up list for days in advance because there are so many people willing to help. I had the opportunity to help run some donations from one of our friends who owns a restaurant and was collecting donations and needed to run it to the drop-off spot. So I'm packing up my car and driving those things over. And it was just a little thing that I could do, but the little ways that people help and the way that people show up is so inspiring. And really, the city of Los Angeles has really rallied around the victims of this fire. And with the understanding that in the next couple of days, we're going to have the exact same conditions again. And it's very scary. But to have these things in place where when someone is in need, there is something there for them. This was just done by the people. This is just the people of Los Angeles getting together and doing it.
I know. I mean, it's amazing how everybody has reacted, and for the most part, or the vast majority, we've all reacted a little bit in the same manner. It's interesting. Lots of sadness, lots of fear, and then suddenly, for a lot of us, a desire to go and help. And
Yeah.
it's been interesting to really be part of a community and to see, it was my first time in a situation
Really?
like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
because I had not experienced any.
Was that knocking on wood that you just
That
did
was
there?
knocking on wood.
Okay.
Yeah, for anybody listening, I just knocked on wood.
Just knocking on his own forehead. Yeah, okay.
But yeah, it was my where we know so many people that have been impacted.
Yeah.
Where we feel for them in a really deep way.
Yeah.
Where you had to evacuate. I mean, partly because you had no power, partly because you had a fire that was not
very
that far.
close to my house. Yeah.
But I had the chance, for example, to leave. Someone had said, the air is bad, just why don't you come over? And I said, no, because if someone needs, people need a place to crash, I need to be able to have that. So it was, and so many people reacted the same way. So it was
Yeah.
really interesting, uplifting. And, we can say that we have maybe issues in society, but when it's time to show up, people show up.
That's
And
true. It's true. Yeah.
It's impressive.
And it was a really hopeful thing to
Yeah.
see in a time of so much devastation, and there are a lot of fears about the future. This year is going to be a wild one, but there is, like, that was a glimmer of hope that I think a lot of us needed. And that's one of the reasons why so many people are participating and trying to help out, because we want to be a part of that hope. I think that's a really beautiful thing. And we have some friends who are directly working to really help. I want to plug lacando.org. I will be putting a link to that on the video, but it's lacando.org. And it is an organization that's been started by Adam Hunter to collect furniture for people who have lost their homes, furnishings, home goods, that sort of thing. And so if you are a designer, or if you have or a retailer and you have furniture that you're willing to donate, you can go to lacando.org and help to find the drop-off place and get all the information that you need in order to make that happen. And then if you are in need of furniture, there is an application that you can find on that website as well. So that was something that Adam has put together in a matter of a couple of days. And considering the fact that he also lost where he was living as well, again, looking at the helpers, look for the people that are really doing a lot. And also your daughter Chloe has been helping out with that as well.
Yeah, from all the way from the Bay Area.
From San Francisco. So it's really bringing people together. And so there are resources that are out there. So in the link in the show notes on this episode, I will put a link to that. And then also I'm going to list a bunch of GoFundMes. I have a lot of friends who've lost their homes, who've lost everything. And many of them have GoFundMe campaigns, and I'm going to do the best that I can to get those out there, so that those who are able to donate are have at least a list of things they can choose from in order to send money. Because if you have it, it's important to share it at this time.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. And the last thing that I want to shout out to is Save Iconic Architecture. So Jamie Rummerfield especially has been really active on social media, sharing the stories of iconic homes that have been lost in the fires.
And that's incredible, the amount. I mean, the Will Roger house, it's, among many others, but that I am, it's a catastrophe.
Yeah. And in the case of those homes being lost to the fires, they're not lost to history.
No.
And Save Iconic Architecture does so much work to preserve the history of it, to be able to tell the stories of these homes. And so I encourage you to follow Save Iconic Architecture. I've said that on the show many times, and I'm going to say it again. Follow Save Iconic Architecture. They're doing a lot to preserve the history and to help share the stories of these pillars of especially LA architecture.
And I think that, the community is going to keep rallying. We have an incredible, many artists have unfortunately lost their homes. So there's a lot of that too. But I think that, the power of LA is all the craftsmen and all those small businesses that are making furniture, so we're going to try to get a list going as well.
Yes.
And over the next, few months, we'll rally that platform, and be able to help out. But in all it is a tragedy. But I'd like to remember that, hell, when we all get together, it's kind of impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And when something like this happens to you, you're not alone.
No.
There are so many people who are eager to show up and to support and to be of service. And that's a real beautiful gift of this city. And it's a beautiful gift of just being a human being. And, you know, we are a lot of things take a village.
Yeah.
And when something takes a village, the village shows up. So it's a really beautiful thing to see. So we should get to our guest for this episode. We recorded it a little while back. But we are interviewing Erik Peterson. Erik is an architect who knows a little something about building from the ground up. And he has so much passion and so much knowledge, and his story is really fascinating. And I think really the core of what he's sharing is how to start from nothing and build up from there. And I think in his story, he does that. And also in his work, he does that.
Yeah, he has incredible work.
And he's so charming. What a charming guy. So I hope you enjoy it. Should we get to it?
Let's go.
Hi, welcome to Clutter Bravado. Today we are here with Erik Peterson. How are you?
Hi, I'm feeling great. Thanks.
Yeah, how is getting here today?
No problem. Great to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk about that. So right away, let's just jump in. You came here from Scottsdale, Arizona, and you're going to be going back tonight.
That's correct.
Okay, great. Then this is something that you do all the time.
Every Wednesday.
So for how long?
5 years now.
For 5 years.
Yes.
Okay, this is amazing to me. And I love hearing about that because they talk about like the daily commuters that are flying, and I've never really met those people. I've always wondered about that. But here you are traveling once a week. So what is your daily timeline when you are in Los Angeles? You fly in at what time?
It's a 7 a.m. flight from Phoenix to Burbank. So it's an hour flight.
Okay.
And then it's about an hour drive from Burbank to Beverly Hills.
Oh my gosh, from Burbank to Beverly Hills. Okay, and then once you're here, you're getting a lot of work done.
Yeah, I have
Beautiful.
4 employees that work in this office.
Okay.
So I meet with them, we update on projects, and then I schedule client meetings, lunches. Usually if there's a event going on at night, I'll go to that event and then jump in an Uber, head back to either LAX or Burbank, and fly home on the last flight.
Your daily schedules, like creating balance, this is something I talk about with a lot of our guests, is creating balance in your business. I want to talk about your business, but before we do that, I want to talk about what's your life like?
That's a good question. So I was turning 50 and 5 years ago, and we became empty nesters, my wife and I, and we sort of had a talk about the firm has been around for 20 years, and we had become one of the top firms in Phoenix. And I just was wondering to myself, is this where it just sort of plateaus, or is there another push, another drive left in me in my life to kind of go to the next level? And I started talking with different editors of magazines and different publishers, and just kind of felt like the feedback I was getting was it's important to be in Los Angeles and show that you've sort of made it in that world stage. And I talked to my wife and I said, I think this might be a good opportunity, but it's going to require a lot of time and effort. And I still felt like I had that energy to do that, and that it would take a lot of effort of me being in Los Angeles quite a bit to make sure that people felt like I was a part of the community.
Yeah.
And not just somebody that was trying to get work there but didn't really care about it.
Sure.
And we said, let's make a go at it. And that did require me coming out here quite often to feel that I was, make people feel like, he's here, to the point where a lot of people think that I actually live here.
That you live here. Yeah. I mean, you kind of do.
Yes.
So you have collaborated with some of the people that we've actually had on the podcast. You've worked with Aaron V.
Yeah.
And you are an architect and based out of Scottsdale, also working here. How is it that you are able to build that community here? Like within the past 5 years, have there been any like challenges that you've had sort of breaking in?
Yeah, for sure. So the 5 years that I've been here certainly was interrupted right in the middle with COVID.
Oh, that's right.
So that was
I
the
forgot about
biggest
COVID
challenge
for
for
a
us.
second.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow.
unfortunately, so I had 2 years prior, and we retained an amazing public relations PR consultant that really was in with the design community that made a ton of connections for me. And from that connection, I started to have lunches with interior designers and with landscape architects, builders, owners reps, and then they saw me at all the events. So
Yeah.
getting involved with the Design Leadership Network, the ICAA, everything that all of the A-list design community was a part of, I was now a part of, and they were seeing me at every one of the events that they were at, and so it's not only just sort of being seen, but it's also earning their trust. So
Yeah.
being somebody that was friendly, likable personality, but being that person that they felt like they could really trust and bring into a project that they may be working on. And through that process, I gained a lot of trust and a lot of great friendships, and that led to the work. And then we do about 50% hospitality and 50% luxury residential.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the hospitality stayed very strong through COVID, but the residential dropped significantly. And
Oh,
since
interesting.
all of
Yeah.
my business in this market comes from referrals,
Okay.
by personal relationships, there was no meetings. Nobody was getting together.
Yeah.
And so having me top of mind really fell short because nobody was seeing anybody. And so that was difficult to get the residential relationships because there just weren't, plus a lot of those clients weren't really even meeting during that time. Nobody wanted people in their home. Nobody wanted
Yeah.
to
No,
even
of
see
course.
anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And it was very
Definitely.
different from Arizona, who, basically that state didn't believe that COVID
Sure,
existed.
sure.
So to travel back and forth between the two states, one where we were totally open and walking around and having meetings in Arizona, getting on a plane that literally had 5 people on it and
Oh,
landing
wow.
at LAX where nobody was in the terminal, jumping in the 1 or 2 Ubers that were available
Yeah.
at the time, which literally had plastic bags all around the back seat to take me to my office. So
Yeah.
it was quite a experience during that time.
Yeah. It's definitely it was definitely a challenging
Yes.
time. Yeah, and very bizarre. I mean, I was in Los Angeles for the entire thing, so I can't imagine the dichotomy of being in Arizona and then coming back out here
Yes.
during that. Wow, that's
And we were fairly open here comparatively to a place like San Francisco.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
sure.
there was still, we were still a little bit out and about, at least.
A little bit,
little bit
yeah.
more.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, a little bit. But that's amazing that you were able to still build that during that time and make it through that.
Yeah.
And the way that I was introduced to you was through a panel that you did at the Pacific Design Center during Fall Market 2024.
Yes.
And you were talking about collaborations. And I think that going from not being in the community at all in Los Angeles to then being someone who's doing it, who's on a panel talking about what it's like to be a collaborator. When it comes to working with other designers and collaborating, what is something that you feel is a principle that is the most important when it comes to doing that?
Yeah, I think it's letting your ego down for the benefit of the project.
Yeah.
And, I think that's a hard thing for some designers to do
No
because
way.
everybody's got to have that power play. I know.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably one of the bigger qualities that I have is that I really enjoy that collaborative process. I like having the interior designer, the landscape architect, even the builder all at the table. We all bring something to the project that makes it better. And, the end result is for the client to have that benefit of all of that collaborative effort. And I think the major thing is that we all like each other. So
Yeah.
I think that is what lets the guard down when I'm sitting across the table from people that I'm friends with and I respect them. And then we could have a really fun time. And I'm not trying to prove something. They're not trying to prove something. And it's just like, I'm getting all excited over what they're bringing to the table. They're getting excited what I'm bringing to the table. And we're having fun during that time.
Yeah.
So for me, the collaborations are really more about finding those people that I really enjoy being friends with.
Yeah.
Is it something that, because even though I look 10 years older than you, I'm actually the same age, but that's okay. We won't judge. Do you think that it's an experience and age that makes you, or were you always like that?
I think I was always that way. I mean, I think my personality is more about creating friendships, and I've collaborated with, people twice my age or, half my age. So, I mean, it's just like that I love the aspect of what everybody brings to it. And especially some of the people that I've worked with who are older than me, they've been able to teach me the importance of travel and, when I travel to see the certain things, to know how to bring that into your design. Some people go and they travel and they walk through projects or hotels and stuff, but some people like notice things like, the table that's around the corner from the lobby, and then there's a lamp that's, over here. And, I've worked with one gentleman that just had all of that data, and we'd sit at meetings and he was able to say at this hotel in Venice and at that hotel in France, and the clients have all been to these places and they know that, they remember that. In the knowledge, the communication of a design through travel and experiences was magical to me. And so that inspired me to want to do those things as well. And I only achieved that by these collaborative efforts and working with all of these different people who had different experiences.
Yeah, there's so much that can be gleaned
Yes.
from people who are in the same industry but are approaching it in different ways.
Yeah.
So how would you describe the way that you approach design? Like maybe even from how you started and how that's evolved over time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to say because I think some people just have a knack for it. Like, you hear musicians talk about, like, they just get the music just came to them. Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like I was just blessed with a way of being able to pull designs just out of, sort of a conversation with a client and seeing a site and being able to merge those things together. And I mean, it really started for me very early on. I mean, I was since like 6th grade, I wanted to be an architect.
Oh, that's so cool.
That's very rare with people
Yeah.
who sort of have had a vision from the very early stages of their development in saying that they want to be something and then becoming that.
Yeah.
And, so I think it started with like watching This Old House on PBS. And it's like an early memory of me and my dad.
Yeah.
And then playing with Legos and building things. And then, when I went to high school, I was at a high school outside of Chicago that had an entire 4-year architecture program.
Really?
Which was very outside of the norm. And so
Yeah.
I was actually able to do some architectural drafting for those 4 years.
Wow.
And at the same time was working in the backstage crew at our drama theater and
Perfect.
designing
Set
all of
design.
the
Yeah,
sets.
yeah, that's so cool.
And I think the thing that really hooked me was I was able to design those sets, build them, and then that moment when the curtain goes up and the audience would like literally applause the scenery that I did, then I was like, that's it. I'm hooked.
Yeah.
I want to do this the rest of my life.
I love that so much. And also, I did know that you were from the Midwest. I knew that you were from Chicago.
Yeah.
And I was going to bring that up because I'm from Wisconsin, just over the border. So I'm like from that same
Yes.
area. My dad grew up in Niles, Illinois.
Yeah.
So,
Park
yeah.
Ridge was right next door.
Oh, yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Oh, that's so cool. So, so you were there and then you went to school in Iowa, correct?
Yes, Iowa State.
Okay. So after that, like how long did you plan on staying in that area, or did you have plans to move out west?
Yeah, no. So I probably didn't even know what Arizona was and that it existed. I always had that dream, like every probably kid that grows up in Chicago and wants to be an architect, of working at Skidmore, Owings and Merrill in the Sears Tower with a
Oh,
suit and
yeah.
tie and a
Yep.
briefcase.
Yep.
And that was my dream. And I went off to college in pursuit of that dream. And in my 4th year, we had a foreign study program in Rome. And I spent an entire semester in Rome and traveling throughout Europe. And that was my first experience in doing something like
Wow.
that.
Yeah.
And I came back from that with a completely changed outlook in life, in different objectives and goals. And it just changed everything for me.
How did you end up in Scottsdale initially?
So during that time, the architecture program's 5 years. So I had one more year after I came back from Rome. And I just couldn't think of anything else but going back to Europe. And so, and then at that time, I was also thinking, gosh, I'm going to have a professional degree, but I won't have a master's degree. And that maybe I should just keep my options open to teaching at some point. And so I should look at, which schools maybe I should go to for a master's degree. And at the time, I was noticing that Chicago and the Midwest was kind of drying up. The work wasn't good, and everybody was looking at firms that were just doing like old age, healthcare, and I was like, oh, I'm not doing that. And so I looked to Forbes magazine. They had an issue that came out that said top 5 states of growth, and I was like, okay, top 5 states of growth. Which of those states have great architecture masters universities? And the top state that came out at the top for me, it was like Texas and Georgia and Florida and Arizona. And I was like, Arizona. Well, Phoenix, Arizona has the Chicago Cubs in spring training.
Oh, that's true. Okay.
And so I was like, gosh, and it tended to be that everybody from the East Coast went to Florida and everybody from the Midwest went to Arizona.
Yeah.
So I said, well, it sort of feels very Midwest here. They've got the Cubs. Because they had the Cubs, there was a lot of Chicago restaurants that I loved in the Phoenix area. Portillo's and Lou Malnati's.
I had no idea about that, actually. That's great.
So I was like, I kind of feel at home here.
Yeah.
And I got accepted to Arizona State University. And just as I was ready to graduate, a friend of mine who I was graduating with said, there's a program that allows us to go back to Europe and work in London if we want to. And he's like, I'm thinking of doing that. Do you want to come? And I was like, oh my God, I want to get back to Europe. And I did love London the best out of all the places we had visited. So I just took a leap of faith and said, I'm going to do this. And I deferred the start of Arizona State for a semester. And we just headed off to London to live together.
Wow, yeah.
And we paired up with a bunch of other university people. These girls happened to be from Boston, and we were in a flat together. And we all got jobs differently. And I ended up with Terry Farrell Architects, which was one of the top 5 architects in London. And it was a magical, unbelievable experience of getting paid a lot of money to work in the most amazing city and have that life experience.
Yeah.
And then moved from London to Phoenix and was in complete culture shock. Because Phoenix
I don't
was
think you
not
can get
London.
more different than that.
That's
actually.
right. Yeah. From cloudy, rainy, foggy to pure sun and dry air.
Oh, wow.
And then the culture that was so much a part of London.
Yeah.
The opera, which I love, the symphony, which I love. And then I was in Phoenix that had a really bad opera and a really bad symphony. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to be able to survive here.
Yeah.
Thank God that's all changed.
Okay.
Because all
of that is
changed
improved.
around.
Okay, beautiful. Good to know.
Yeah, it was a big culture shock for me.
Yeah. What are your comparisons, I guess, with Los Angeles and with Scottsdale? Like, now that you are working out here, are there some things that you like? Give me your pros and cons. Like, what do you feel about Los Angeles versus Arizona?
Well, they're both sort of new cities. And I mean new cities by the way people are looking at how to create architecture is in a very modern way. They're looking at it sort of through fresh eyes and through future eyes. versus maybe going back to the Midwest or even the East Coast, which still has a more traditional sense on how to live
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
and the environment. Even when you're looking in the Hamptons and things like that, it's just has an older feel to and I think even the culture is sort of, people live in more of a traditional way than they do when they're moving to Arizona or Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, I think is very worldly. Like when you start to see trends, and we don't like to talk about trends a lot, but they do
Yeah.
sort of start in a place and sort of move. And this is really one of those birthplaces for trends. Like really everything sort of starts in LA and then it sort of moves across the country.
Yeah.
And and sometimes it might even start in Europe and then head to LA and then go across the country. And so it's really a place that I see lots of energy and excitement and futuristic sort of thinking, and Arizona follows always in that. Like,
Okay.
and so I felt like a lot of things that were happening a year later in Phoenix generated out of what was happening in LA.
Okay.
And so I just was like, gosh, I just want to be in on that at
Yeah.
the beginning.
Yeah, you get to be a part of the birth of it, where
Yes.
you're like, "Ooh, this is the new thing that's coming," and you get to be the person who's bringing it to
Yeah.
Arizona. So you were a little bit touchy about the word trend, and I think that's interesting, and I want to go into it. So you don't like to talk about trends. I'm gonna just go into this for a minute. I have opinions. Trends in architecture specifically, because it is something that is not just like a piece of fast fashion that you're like, "Oh, this year we're wearing this color." There are obviously things that become really sort of fashionable. And in architecture, how are you able to relate that? How long is the trend cycle in architecture? And how are you able to sort of prolong that in order to create something that is more lasting and that someone is going to be satisfied with for a longer time?
Yeah, trends, because we do high-end luxury residential, we don't want to create something that's trendy, because
Yeah.
we're a custom design firm, so we feel that we're maybe above creating a trend for somebody. And I think where we got completely buried in that being a negative word was during that whole Tuscan era.
Yeah.
And it just became so
Yeah.
ingrained in like everybody coming in and wanting a Tuscan house, and
Sure.
and having to kind of live through that whole era, essentially, of everybody saying that that's the style that they need to have. And obviously that was the work at the time, and so our job during that time period wasn't just to create what everybody else was creating, but to create something as authentic as we can, not even calling it Tuscan, calling it Mediterranean. And there's different versions of Mediterranean. We try to educate our client on what made something truly Mediterranean and why certain things were done, and not just like copy what they've seen in a magazine that
Yeah.
they think was cool. And try to create something timeless and real and authentic. And that's how we kind of got through
Yeah,
that phase.
yeah.
And what's interesting is there's always been a trend through the homes that we've done, and why we kind of have a motto about living architecture, is because it is timeless, but you need to live in these buildings. And a lot of that time period was about sort of these dark and heavy materials that made the rooms and the livability of the house feel very heavy and enclosed. And it's funny because now we're doing a lot of remodels to change those homes during that time, or even tear them down. But I feel like even the work that we did during that time sort of still carried through with the intent on the architecture that we have, where we created humanistic scaled rooms that had natural light, and didn't ever get down into that traditional trendy style of just heavy beams and tons of stone and
Yeah.
dark materials.
Yeah. So in Los Angeles, something that I've noticed, and I could be totally wrong about this, I don't know a lot about architecture, which is why I'm grateful to have you on here today. But it seems as if the life cycle of a lot of homes is very short here. That something will be really trendy and will it'll show its age over time because it's no longer something that's really standing out.
Yeah.
That has that timelessness to it. And I was wondering, in your opinion, personal opinion or professional opinion, is there something that may have been really big, not just like, because you were talking about the Tuscan look, like, is there something that is happening now that you're seeing in architecture that you feel like is not going to age very well?
I still think that modern homes have to be warm. And
Yeah.
there's been a trend for quite a while. You see it, I think now over the past, definitely maybe getting close to 6 or 7 years now, of these sort of white boxes, just glass and white stucco and big spaces. And there's not a lot of warmth in that. So I think the architects and designers that are being the most successful at that are where they're creating still a humanistic scale and warm materials in those spaces, so that it doesn't become hard contemporary, which I think is great for like an artistic sense or a museum type party house. But for something that you're going to live in, you're drawn to materiality that has comforting factors to it. And that could be modern, and I think that's a big reason why that the postmodern movement was so successful, because it blended sort of colors and materials that we all love together with a modern, house.
Yeah.
And you still see so much of that in Palm Springs, and it's a huge movement of people who love that architecture because there's something that just has a humanistic quality to it.
Absolutely. I like that you keep using the word humanistic, and the human scale, because I've definitely been through a few buildings that I'm like, oh, this doesn't feel like I'm supposed to be in here. Like, this is a place that you pass through or that you look at or that you can admire. But I feel like, especially in a lot of residences, when you have like the large scale, the huge ceilings, the really big rooms, there is something that feels like it's missing. And so, yeah, I really appreciate that you brought that up too.
It turns into a museum, or a hotel.
Yeah,
not even
a
hotel.
But yeah.
I think a museum is probably the best way to say it, because I feel like that's when the ego of the architect is more important, right? It's about creating a sculptural element that's an ode to the architect as a sculptural piece, and it has nothing to do with the person who's going to be living there.
Yeah.
And that's okay if somebody wants that. Let's say if you hire Frank Gehry, you know what you're getting, right? You're going to get a sculptural piece. If you hire Zaha Hadid, you're going to get a sculptural piece, and everybody who goes there is going to say, "Oh yeah, that's Frank Gehry." It's not about the person; it's about the sculptural piece that you're buying, and that's great. There's a place for that, Disney Hall and the Guggenheim museums. And there's a reason, in sort of even a touristy way, that they want to create that. But I think for a home, this is a place that is really about the people who are living there and the place that you've set it, whether that's in Arizona, which will take a different form than it would in California, because the sun is different, the temperatures are different, the colors around you are different. And so all of those things have to take into the design concept to make it feel like it belongs.
So in your process, because obviously you have, you're tasked to design a building, but then there's the humanistic. So at what point do you collaborate with a designer? At what point do you feel like you need that input? Because I feel like that's
really from day one is important for me, because I want to be in there from the start, and I want the designer to also be there from the start. It's so important to hear those first few conversations with the client, whether it's a couple, husband and wife, whatever it might be, that you're hearing all of their wishes and desires. We create an experience for our clients. I compare it more to like going to a Waldorf Astoria as opposed to a Holiday Inn. There, you still get a place to sleep, but the whole experience of every single thing that happens to you through your stay at a Waldorf Astoria makes you feel special. And that's what we do with our clients through the design process. We want them to come in, we want them to share their most intimate ways of how they live in the house, who their friends are, who the family is, how they party, how they relax. Like that's all very sort of like emotional pieces of information, and we have to listen to that. We have to understand, what do they like in the morning? You know, do they like the sun coming in and a cup of coffee? Do they exercise? You know, what are the unique traits? Because that all works into how we're going to lay that house out. And if I'm getting that information and the interior designer isn't, or vice versa, then we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
I love that piece about collaboration. And I also, on the other side of the coin, want to know what your ego project would look like.
Yeah. I don't know if I have one. I mean, for me, the ego part is creating something so unique and special for the client. Like when a client turns and says, "You created the greatest project for me."
Yeah.
Like that's my ego. Like, okay, cool, I'm the greatest, right? Like I don't feel like looking at something that is just a sculptural piece that is super cool that a whole bunch of other architects might like, that but nobody could really live in.
Sure.
You know, even more so, like our hospitality work maybe is even more exciting for me because, and this is more of the ego talking. When you do a house, it just might be the two people you're doing the house for. When you do a resort, you're dealing with hundreds, even thousands of people a year that you're touching the lives on.
Yeah.
And for me, there's the ego boost because I could do a project that, now touches thousands of people. And I just love to like go sit in the corner of a restaurant we've done or a hotel that we've done and just see the people walking through it.
Ooh,
See them
yeah.
walking in and like their eyes lighting up, or see a whole family having a party and, creating amazing memories. That to me, like they have no clue that I'm the guy that created it all, but that is an awesome experience.
Wow.
It's funny because for me, so I totally get it, but I would be like one of the dreams is to do a hospitality, but it would be on the worker side, to be able to go to a hotel and be like, this thing is working so well that all those employees are just happy to be there.
Yes.
That would make me really happy. It's
Yeah.
funny because it's, having worked in the hotels, I would look at it from like, so in that respect, how do you combine the both?
Yeah. So our whole process is completely integrated with, all of the behind the scenes. I mean, when we do a hotel, we've been doing the Mayborn Hotel conversion, from the Montage in Beverly Hills. It integrates everything from the design side to what the guest needs to feel, to having everybody down to the head of the custodial staff, understanding that we need to have all of this back of house. A lot of these hotels are like mini Disney worlds.
Right.
There's all the back hallways and and even the higher end and luxury you get, the more there is behind the scenes, because things have to be almost invisible on how things happen with the guests. And so I love that aspect of it. I think it's really exciting because it is got that Disney-esque component to it, where you're like creating secret passageways and secret hallways and areas where they could, maintain, the guest comfortability. So to us, it's equally as important, especially when, we're one of the top golf club architects in the West. And, a lot of clubs might think, oh, well, we could just hire any architect. Well, there's only a few really good club architects. And the key to that is because we know the operations. We know what happens within a golf club, how they work, and, how much staff is needed to work these clubs, how the restaurant has to work within it. And so the design has to be done in a way that that has this great client experience, but also meets all of the objectives for the business plan on how many employees there needs to be, what employees need to work double duties, whether they're maintaining a bar and servicing the dining room. Like we have to know all of that information.
And that also ties back into your set designing from like early
Yeah.
childhood.
And that's probably where it would go.
Yeah.
If everything were to go full circle, I would love to get back into
I was just
set
going to
design.
ask you that same thing now that
Yeah.
you're in Los Angeles.
Yes.
And, we're about to get a little bit more of a boost, hopefully, of the entertainment industry back here.
Yeah.
That would be an incredible
Yeah.
like step into something creative for you,
Yeah.
something that's different. That's really neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Opera, I mean, if I had a retirement plan and I could just list out whatever I wanted to do, it'd be probably to travel to the greatest opera houses in the world and just design sets and design a set, in Paris and see it built and see the production, and then go on to Milan and do it in Milan and do another one in Venice, and just sort of like
I think that
end
is-
my career
yeah.
like that.
I think
Wow.
that's a perfect arc for
Yeah.
you. Yeah. I wish that for you.
Yeah, thanks.
I can see that coming too. That's beautiful. So we ask all of our guests 3 questions.
Okay,
Are you ready for them?
I'm ready.
Okay. The first question is, what is the messiest place in your home?
Oh, interesting. I am pretty clean, but I would say my closet.
Closet.
Yeah.
You're just stashing all of your skeletons in there.
Yeah, I kind of just throw everything into there. I'm not one of those guys that has all my blacks and all my whites and all my blues. Yeah.
Okay. This is also, I'm like trying to find trends.
And
like
it's a place that I don't really
like,
look. Like if
Okay.
I see things around the house that are a mess, I'm a little bit tidy, but
Okay.
that tends to be my place where I throw things.
I love, so I've talked about this before on the podcast, but when I've asked this of artists and creatives and like people who aren't designers or architects or have to do things like by like the inch with everything,
Yeah.
like it's so precise. Like I'm an artist, my house is trashed all the time. I'm just kidding. It's pretty neat and tidy,
Yeah.
but like it's organized chaos.
Uh-huh.
But I love it when I hear a designer saying like, nope, everything is exactly in its place except for
Yeah.
a closet or a garage. Like that's beautiful. I think that's great.
Yeah, I forgot the garage.
the
That's
garage
not
too?
in the house.
Aha!
My garage is a disaster. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Okay, cool. So second question. When you walk into a space, whether it was here today or if it's into a home or your own home, what is the first thing that you notice?
Lighting.
Lighting.
It's the most important thing to me.
What are, do you have preferences?
Well, it just has to be lit well. I think it's number one, just with natural light, but then also anything with artificial lighting, you know instantly. I mean, it could be that most absolutely beautiful, stunning room, but if it's lit horribly, it's a disaster.
Yeah.
Like you feel bad, you don't feel like you look good. Like it's the worst.
Yeah.
And so you could spend all this time and all this money and have amazing artwork and amazing furniture, and it'll just look horrible.
Do you think that that's a big part of the hospitality too in you?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, when you walk into a place and it's magical, and when it's horrible.
Yeah.
And it
yeah.
ruins everything for you.
Yeah.
It completely ruins your attitude, your feeling, you're either sleepy or awake, And the Ketra lighting system is, the newest technology, which is supposed to then change everything, because every single light bulb can be controlled completely separately and can change its color tone throughout the day. So in the morning, everything is supposed to be whiter and bluer and brighter light. So it kind of wakes you up and gives you energy. And then throughout the day, it changes colors so that it's warm oranges towards nighttime and dimmer so that it slows you down, quiets you down, has your brain kind of slow down. And then finally, it could go down at night. And so there's a few places that actually do this in hospitality. I think the MGM, one of the MGMs in Vegas, I'm forgetting the one, but there's a few places where you could go where they actually do this, and
I feel
the
like
hotel
Vegas,
room
that
would
makes sense that it's in
change
Vegas. Yeah.
for you. Yeah. But I think
Yeah.
if you get to experience that ever, it's really magical
Wow.
on how it affects everything, how you feel about yourself throughout the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do a lot of I've learned a lot from listening to podcasts and reading about it, but about circadian rhythms
Yes.
and like how to wake up in the morning. I
Absolutely.
leave like one of my windows open, so when the sun rises, I've been starting to
Yes.
wake up earlier in the morning.
It's real.
Yeah, and I also will never use an overhead light. I can't do it. I can't do it personally.
Yeah.
I don't think you have any here, do you?
I hear you're safe.
Not even one. Yeah, there's not even one.
We're pretty much we're gonna go back to candles. here.
Yes, I like it.
Which
I like
is
it.
amazing light.
Oh, it's so
I know
good.
it's funny because this apartment, 1920s, we
Yeah.
have no. I mean, there's no chandelier here.
Yes.
So it's all, but it's funny because at night it's just like super, and I do light up candles. I like the candlelight
Yes.
because it kind of makes you be like, well, it's time to shut down. And it's I was talking to a designer who has their project has 193 recessed lighting in the house. And I'm like, that's the version of me that sounds like hell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like I'm like 100. It doesn't matter. It's just it should not. But so here we're safe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the living room in my apartment has a bunch of them. It's not a huge room, and it has so many of them. And anytime I've turned it on, it just feels so cold and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I just can't stand it. But lighting, beautiful. Thank you for your
Yeah.
answer. Third question. What is your favorite space in your home or favorite space that you have created? You can pick one of the two.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I prefer like smaller, intimate spaces, and so like little cozy nooks tend to be things that I'm drawn to, and I'm not sure why. I don't know why that maybe something in my childhood made that comfortable feeling, but anything that you could sort of like get sort of into a cozy little niche with tons of pillows and just kind of get all cushy in it
Yeah.
I tend to get drawn to.
I like that. That reminds me, as you were describing that, I thought of the den in my grandparents' house.
Everybody has these memories, and
where
that's
it was
why
like
I think it's
it was like wood paneling in the room, but they had
Yeah.
like cozy couches, and that was like where everyone after dinner would just like go
Yeah.
and like have a seat, watch TV or watch a movie before we go to bed, and like
Yeah.
it was just like this cozy little area. I love that.
Yeah.
Did you have that in your childhood home?
I can't remember that, but I think I always liked to be cuddled.
Yeah.
Like, and so I think
Yeah.
those
Did you make forts as a
spaces-
kid?
Oh, all the time.
Pillow forts all
Yes.
the time? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, but the big thing that I had as a child was a train set. That was I had an
nice.
HO scale,
Yeah.
and I had it all laid out in my basement. And I would just go down there for hours and build new buildings and add new pieces of track. But that's
So when you say that you've been doing this forever, you've been doing this forever.
Yes.
You've been building forever.
Yeah.
I love that. You've had like your eye on one thing and you've aimed there. And that's what
Yeah.
makes me feel like you're going to be doing set design in
Yeah.
opera houses all over the world.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, like late into your 70s if you feel like it.
Yeah.
Or, you should retire by then and just go lay down. You've been quite busy. Thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you. This
time
has
out
been
of your
great.
schedule, your very quick trip to Los Angeles. Gosh, but thank you so much for giving us this time.
This
It's
was
been
fun.
wonderful getting to know you. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
being here.